here and thankful for your interest and engagement today. Hello and welcome to the ARPA-H Investor Catalyst Hub November member meeting featuring the Catalyst program and its program manager, Dr. Andy Kilianski. My name is Jordan Ashwood, and I'm a senior program officer with the Investor Catalyst Hub managed by VentureWell. So thank you all for joining us today to learn more about the Catalyst program. I'd love to first share a brief agenda for today's call. First, I will share a couple of announcements and reminders pertaining to Investor Catalyst Hub membership and the Catalyst program. I will then formally introduce Dr. Andy Kilianski to you all. He will then share his presentation with you to provide further insight into the Catalyst program and what his team is looking for in solution summary submissions. Following that, we will have a Q&A session. We asked each registrant to submit a question about the Catalyst program in advance, so we've used these questions as a starting point for the Q&A, but please do share any other questions you have in the Q&A tool throughout the presentation and during the Q&A, and we will address as many as time allows today. And then we'll close with a final couple of reminders. So on to some announcements. In reference to the Catalyst program, our exciting focus for today's session, and we can also go to the next slide. The deadline to submit a solution summary to the Catalyst program is November 25th. So we encourage you to check out Catalyst Proposers Day resources, including the Proposers Day recording, the Catalyst program page, the Catalyst teaming page. This is where you can identify other organizations interested in submitting to this program, as well as the Innovative Solution opening page. So we have just shared all these links in the chat and hope you find them helpful as you consider submitting a solution summary. We will also be sending these links to you in a follow-up email after today's session, just in case you don't catch them in the chat. For those of you here today who are Investor Catalyst Hub Spoke members, we wanted to also just share a reminder that we've launched an interactive member community on the member portal, making it easier for you all as Spoke members to connect and collaborate for upcoming solicitations or projects. So we would love to specifically hear from you about what topics you'd like to see discussed in future monthly meetings. So feel free to click on the link in the chat. It will take you to the member portal, and please share your thoughts on what topics you'd like to hear or what type of virtual networking you'd be interested in. All right, and with that, I would now like to formally introduce ARPA-H Program Manager, Dr. Andy Kilianski, to you all. Dr. Kilianski joined ARPA-H in May of 2023 from the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative, where he served as Senior Director for Emerging Infectious Diseases. He led IAVI's filovirus vaccine portfolio while also supporting strategy development and key stakeholder engagement across the entire emerging infectious diseases portfolio. Before joining IAVI, he was a senior scientist and senior and technology manager at the Department of Defense, where he built programs focused on countering emerging biological threats. He received his doctorate in microbiology and immunology from Loyola University of Chicago, where he studied virus-host interactions important for coronavirus pathogenesis. So we're very happy to have you with us here today, Dr. Kilianski, to share more about the Catalyst program. And now over to you. And next slide, please.
Great. Thank you, Jordan. And it's great to see everyone this afternoon. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I want to spend a little bit of time, save a lot of time for questions and answers, but just reviewing the Catalyst program, which is a new program that my team just launched a couple of weeks ago. Like Jordan mentioned, abstracts for the program are due on the 25th of November. So there's still a few weeks to put together a team and consider an abstract submission into the program. Next slide, please. So the goal of the Catalyst program is really to transform how we get drugs to first-in-human trial approval. Catalyst, we want to do this in the program by generating a suite of in silico methodologies that are enabled by artificial intelligence as well as physics and simulation-based models to accelerate safer and more effective drugs into the clinic in a time frame of months instead of years, and from a foundation of human data that makes the assessments on drug safety and efficacy in the preclinical space more predictive and more accurate. So we're all familiar, and if we go to the next slide, familiar with some of the problems in drug development. Less than 10% of all drugs that enter into clinical trials end up being licensed therapies. And 75% of these therapies fail in clinical trials due to safety and efficacy. And so we are doing a very poor job of predicting drug safety and efficacy with preclinical models that we use today, right? And those are overwhelmingly, especially in the safety arena, in vivo models and other types of living systems methodologies, right, that don't accurately recapitulate human physiology. So we're already using computational tools right across drug development. And so the goal of the Catalyst program is, again, to transform the future of first-in-human trial approval by building models that help us more accurately assess toxicity and safety, that help us inform dose range for clinical studies, help us understand drug pharmacology. And then finally, we envision a world in the future in which the phase 1 clinical trial becomes obsolete. Right, so we want to be able to really digitally twin phase 1 trial participants in a preclinical environment that's going to allow for us to be more predictive of the endpoints that we would like to measure in the clinical study arena. Next slide, please. So again, drug development, linear process. We're really seeing a lot of interesting, especially AI tools being brought into the computational preclinical space. A lot of that's in like the lead discovery, very early stages of drug development, target identification, pathway identification, starting molecule down selection. So we want to, bring approaches such as those into the drug safety predictive arena in ways that are able to refine and replace what we do in regulated study environments today, right? So think regulatory interaction, think IND-enabling types of studies. We're really interested at changing the paradigm within those contexts. And so if we're successful in Catalyst, we're going to have outsized patient economic impact because we're going to see drugs accelerate in their pathway to license. We're going to be more predictive, and so we're going to be better at programming resources around clinical studies. And really, what makes this an ARPA-H program is that we want to break down this bottleneck, right, that really chokes out a lot of innovation, especially in smaller market therapies, underserved populations, rare diseases, right, areas in which spending $10 million and waiting 2 years to do a non-human primate IND-enabling study could be prohibitive of a therapy even entering the clinic at all. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit about how we envision this program coming together. And again, there's a whole lot of details in our solicitation that's available online. But just at a high level, we're going to need likely companies that are developing in silico models, because for Catalyst, we have requirements around good laboratory practice equivalency in a digital environment. We really want digital CROs to emerge from this program. And so we need companies who are at the cutting edge of model development. We're going to need researchers, academic clinician researchers, because we likely don't have all the tools and all the data that we need to put this together today. And then what unique part of the Catalyst program is including product sponsors and people with candidate drugs that have an in silico assay methodology requirement, bring them into the program and help them inform the development of these tools from the beginning. So the program is split into two phases. Phase 1 is all about the method development, building the in silico toolkit that's going to allow for us to better predict clinical outcomes preclinically. And then the second phase is all about adoption of those methodologies by including those in silico tools in an IND-enabling study package, right, for a novel pharmaceutical, either small molecule or biologic. Next slide, please. And ARPA-H will, and you can click forward, I think, 4 times. ARPA-H in the second phase will be supporting the totality of an IND-enabling study package, right, with the requirement that the sponsor for a product will include the in silico methodologies within that package. So the Catalyst approach is split across 3 separate technical areas, or TAs. Technical area 1 is all about data discovery methodology, predictive drug safety model build, and doing this in a good laboratory practice equivalent digital environment, right? So there's a lot of data out there. It's all over the place. It all looks different, right? And this really constrains our ability to use things like deep learning to better predict drug safety with the data that we have today. And so TA1 is focused on how do we bring that data together? How do we discover data that's disparate across the biomedical research infrastructure? And then how do we build predictive drug safety models using that data in a way that is GXP compliant, right? Because the hallmarks of this program is we want to enable the creation of a digital CRO market around drug safety prediction with in silico tools. And to do that, we need to be aligning to the good laboratory practice guidelines that FDA requires for wet lab experimentation. Technical area two is we can go back, is a acknowledgement that while there is a lot of data out there, we might not have enough to build the models that are going to be truly predictive. And so we have investments in TA2 and living systems tools for model development. And so in this technical area, we want people to bring living systems, whether those are complex in vitro systems, ex vivo systems, in vivo methodologies, and even clinical cohort types of studies on human patients to really assess from a human physiology standpoint how we can better generate data to help us build the models that we need from an in silico perspective. And then TA3 is a focus on in silico human physiology models, comprehensive models that are built in a physics and simulation-based way that represent an organ system, systems of organ systems, or eventually that digital twin in which we can really recapitulate phase 1 clinical trials in an in silico environment. What ties these all together is the inclusion of a product sponsor. And so we are requiring either if you submit to option 1, which is TA1 alone, and we can jump ahead to. Yeah, we can keep going. Option 2, which is TA2 and TA3 paired together, or all 3 technical areas represented, we are requiring a product sponsor to be included in each of those submissions, right? So that we can build that translational tie-in from methodology, discovery, and development all the way through to translation and use within a preclinical regulated study environment. You can click ahead a few, I think. So this is just a detailed breakdown of the program. So I mentioned the first phase, which is all about that method development, is 36 months. Within this first phase, ARPA-H will be doing multiple assessments on the teams that are selected, right? With the end goal being either regulatory qualification or assessment by a regulatory agency of these methodologies and their, fit for purpose or context of use in conjunction with a pharmaceutical sponsor. And then if there's success in phase 1 and we get a method that's qualifiable and able to be used in a regulated study environment, in the second phase, we're going to take 18 months and we're going to be working primarily with the product sponsor part of the team. Again, to fund IND-enabling studies to generate data that supports the use of those in silico methodologies in something like an IND filing. And success in phase 2 looks like first in human trial approval with the inclusion of the in silico methodologies that we develop in Catalyst within the first phase. Next slide, please. So our success looks like the creation of a new digital CRO market, right? That enables more equitable and patient-focused drug development in ways that enable smaller markets, smaller margin therapies, things being brought forward by NGOs or the academic community, or rare disease therapies to make their entry into human clinical trials in a way that is more predictive than the tools that we use today. Next slide, please. Can we go ahead one more, I think? Okay, right. So one of the hallmarks here is that we want tools that are generalizable, right? So built for context of use that are impactful across potential candidate products. We want those product sponsors to be a part of the discussion. And these product sponsors, they could be companies, but they could also be academic medical institutions. They could be NGOs, anyone with a candidate drug that they would like to get into first in human trials. And really, we see throughout the context of the Catalyst program, but also beyond, right? These tools to be sort of an iteratively improving tools that allow for us to incorporate data that we generate into tools and models that are going to allow for us to better predict human outcomes preclinically. Next slide, please. So really the drug development of today, right, is a process that is not effective, right? And we lose a lot of promising candidates along the way because our preclinical predictions are poor. And maybe we predict something like human toxicity in an animal that doesn't occur in humans, right? So there's potential promising candidates that don't make it into first in humans because our assessments are not predicted preclinically. And then we lose a lot of those drugs that do make it into first in human trials along the way for reasons that are related to safety and efficacy. And so if we can build a better predictive foundation for our preclinical experimentation using these in silico methodologies, right, we'll be able to get to a place where we have increased throughput from discovery to drug. So we can really harness and leverage the power of these AI-enabled tools in drug discovery, right, with parallel approaches that can be done on the safety side. We're going to have reduced time and cost of drug development. And at the end of the day, because we're pursuing human foundation, and we're pursuing the inclusion of populations that typically don't get represented in clinical trials or that really only see a drug after license, we want safer, more representative, and more personalized drugs, right, that are going to really be enabled for access across the country in a more effective way. Next slide, please. I think there's a timeline slide about next steps. So I really quickly just wanted to go through what the next steps are in terms of interaction with the Catalyst program, and then would love to open it up for questions. So we had a Proposers Day a couple weeks ago. All of that content is available online. The briefings from me and my team, we had some of our interagency partners from the NIH and FDA who talked about their perspective on the problem and some of the programs that they're working that are uniquely collaborative with the Catalyst program. We have our abstracts that are due on the 25th of November, and so that's in 2 Mondays. The abstract is a 4 to 6 page abstract. It has a rough order of magnitude budget and a description of the team. And this is really the first interaction point in which we get to see the concepts that industry, academia, et cetera, are all potentially bringing to the table. So those abstracts are due, and once those abstracts are received, we enter into source selection process. And so our team will review those abstracts over a week to 2 weeks, and we will then return either an encourage to submit a full proposal or a discourage letter to all the teams that submitted abstracts. Those of you who get a encourage letter have 8 to 10 weeks to put together a full proposal. Those are due on the 31st of January. And that's a more comprehensive technical appendix, cost and budget appendix, and all the paperwork that goes with a government full proposal. Those details are also available in our solicitation. After those full proposals are received, we then impanel a scientific review board at ARPA-H, which is comprised of ARPA-H program managers and staff, interagency partners from across the Department of Health and Human Services, but also from the Department of Defense, from the VA, from EPA, from other parts of the government that have scientific expertise in these areas. We then review all of the proposals within a couple of month time frame. And then after that, we determine which teams we want to select, and we issue a notice of award. After that notice of award, we have a few months to negotiate around contracts for the teams to come together contractually and really put together a program plan that's going to allow for us to execute on those contracts, get those awards signed, and then kick off the program likely in the early to mid-summer. I believe that is it for me. I just really want to highlight the 25th of November is when abstracts are due. The abstract submission is a requirement. And so I'd love to answer any questions, demystify the process, talk about some of what we look for in an abstract from the teams as much as we can here over the next few minutes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Andy. Dan, if you're able to share my video, that would be great. But in the meantime, thank you so much, Andy, for providing this insight on the Catalyst program. We're now going to jump into the Q&A portion of today's session. So for those of you who submitted questions in advance, we will begin by addressing those. And then to attendees in the room, if you think of other questions as we're discussing, please add them to the Q&A tool and we'll address as many as time allows. So jumping in, Andy, one of the first questions we have was, could you elaborate on the desired ADMET scopes for small molecules versus biologics? And would proposals that focus on ADMET subsets be considered responsive?
Yeah, so it's a great question. We are therapeutic modality agnostic. So we really want to stress, right, the potential translational capabilities of the software tools that we're going to be building as part of this program. If we develop methodologies, right, and they sit on a server or a shelf somewhere, we haven't been successful in the Catalyst program. And so we really want, especially the commercial entities who are going to be a part of this program, to be thinking about, okay, how do I build a product that's going to be most effective in a CRO environment? How do we build tools that are going to be most applicable to a context of use or a demand signal from a potential contractor, subcontractor. So we really want the submitters to drive those types of questions. And so we are modality agnostic. If you have a great tool that is applicable for small molecules, but less so for biologics, or maybe more applicable for biologics and less so for small molecules, or you have a tool that's generalizable, all of those are potentially within scope.
Okay, that's great to hear. Thank you. We now have a couple questions about TA3. So the first question is, are only AI and ML-based models requested for T3, or can they complement PBPK-based ADME-Tox modeling as well?
Great question. And so TA3, we view as more simulations and physics-based types of models. We think that artificial intelligence likely has a place to play to help accelerate and make those tools more accurate and more predictive. But we are, we have requirements in our solicitation. I'd say, especially on the technical aspects of the types of models to be used. I'd say there's a little bit of wiggle room for creative approaches that maybe we didn't forecast or we know less about within our team. And so I would say if you have a computational solution which you think can meet the requirements of the program, right, to eventually replace an in vivo methodology that we use in these IND enabling studies today, we'd love to see it.
Okay, great. And along the same lines, but I think worth sharing, is TA3 about in silico physiology, pharmacology, or QSP?
Yeah, so it's a great question. It's a broadly inclusive TA3. So
Okay.
again, we want to get within TA3 towards an environment where we can get to that digital twin. Right, the goal of the technical area 3 is really to be able to represent a clinical trial population, right, in preclinical experiments, which we
Yeah.
can't do today. But yes, I all of those methodologies, especially in the multimodal space, are potentially applicable to the requirements within TA3.
Okay, great. Thank you. We also had a question about whether is inclusion of real-time, real-world human data as part of the data generation or validation process permissible or even encouraged?
I'd say if there are access to those types of data sets and we can better understand human physiology for the purposes of modeling it within the Catalyst program, 100%.
Okay.
I would say human cohort types of data and novel types of data collection methodologies would fit probably in the TA1 or TA2 bin. And so yes, we would like to see any interesting sort of clinical data collection.
Wonderful. And should the focus of solutions that are submitted for the solution summary be on one condition, one organ, or should folks think about proposing a more systemic solution?
Yeah, so it really depends. And I know that's the classic like government program manager answer. But I would say take a very close look at the solicitation. Obviously, if there's the ability to get towards more generalizable and comprehensive types of modeling capabilities, that's what we kind of push for in that solicitation. I know that we have some requirements around minimum number of systems to be represented, organ systems, et cetera. Those are guides as you're putting together your solicit or your abstract for submission. And we'll have feedback if the solution looks great, but maybe it's too limited or it's too broad in scope. So we'd like to see all the solutions, whether specific to an organ system or a type of endpoint, or if it's a very generalizable type of tool that you can use for multiple types of endpoint analyses within something like an IND enabling study. I think that answers that question, Jordan.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's great to hear that some of that feedback will be included in sort of the encouragement or discouragement at the solution submission stage. I know you talked about and sort of overviewed product sponsors and the role that they play. Can you share any more detail that might be useful for folks to consider when thinking about requirements for product sponsors? Can they be smaller drug discovery or development companies?
100%. Yeah. So all we mean by product sponsor is someone who's got something that they want to get into first in human approval. And that's it. That it can be a small
Right.
company, it can be a large company, it can be an academic institute, it can be an NGO. We see especially in some of the smaller market, smaller margin types of therapies, right? Sometimes it is an NGO, right? Or it is a group of academics who's licensed some technology and they're looking to get into first in human. We're open to any kind of product sponsor relationship. The reason it's in there is because we really feel that the only way we're going to be able to successfully drive adoption of these tools, right, is to show that they can be used and that they can withstand the rigor of something like a regulatory review and a first-in-human safe to proceed from the FDA. And so that's the environment that we want to get to, right? And by having a product sponsor who can have those early interactions with a regulatory agency, who can think about and guide on context of use, and who can help generate data around a particular package submission into a regulatory authority, we'll be able to break through that and really, if successful, display the results and the predictability, right, of these tools in the long term.
Okay, thank you. We've had a number of questions coming in just about teaming, and so would love to shift gears a little bit to talk about that. So a few questions here. Is there sort of a size for sort of an ideal size for teams that folks should be considering?
Yeah, that's another it depends question.
Yeah.
I think typically the most successful proposals we've seen in other programs have all been interdisciplinary. And I think you're likely to see the same thing here. It's unlikely any one entity, organization, et cetera, can really do everything that we're asking for within the Catalyst program. And so it's very likely to be a teamed exercise. On the team size, obviously, a team with 1,000 members, probably a little bit too big. A team with 2 people, maybe too small. And so it's really all about the technical requirements and the teams that are going to be able to come together and pursue those. We've seen many different types of teams come together that are from all different types of technical and operational backgrounds. And so we have right now on our Catalyst webpage, we have a teaming website that's appended to that. There's over 120 groups, entities, laboratories, individuals, companies that have put together a teaming profile that they've shared with everyone. And so I would ask anyone who's thinking about teaming around this or who's looking and might want to pursue a teaming opportunity to go to the program page and find that teaming website because there's some really valuable potential applications there.
Yeah, and on a related note, I mean, do you think that there is sort of a helpful balance to be considering between academic, industry, and startup partners within that team dynamic?
Yeah, so at ARPA-H, our programs are measured on their patient impact, right? So while publications are great and scientific progress is awesome, we really want at the end of the program to have something that's going to be patient impactful, right? So for us, that looks like regulatory interaction. It looks like translation and commercialization of the technologies that we develop as part of the program. So they'll really sustain in the long term and become this new digital CRO type of an industry. So I'd ask the teams, regardless of composition, to really be thinking about commercialization strategy, intellectual property, what you're going to take and build in the first phase of the program is going to be used in a way that complies with regulators in the second phase of the program, and then we'll pave the way for using these tools broadly across drug development, when Catalyst is over.
Okay, that's great to hear. And do all members need, like, do all team members need to be confirmed by November 25th? Do they all need a cage code by November 25th?
So that's a great question. And on the 25th abstracts, I believe the submission system does require some identifying information around the teams that come together. We'll get that refined for you, Jordan. Certainly by the time full proposals are due, any entity that would be part of one of these teams would need to be, registered to do business with the US government.
Okay, wonderful. And actually, on a related note, just in terms of sort of eligibility, a question has come in about whether a company that has majority share ownership by a family office or a VC, if they're able to participate.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and
Simple
we've seen in
answer.
other programs, some of the most innovative approaches that we've seen have come from stealth companies that are very new and we have funded some of those partners on other efforts.
Okay, great to hear. There was a question that came in just to go back to product sponsors for a bit. Can sponsors for the second phase also be submitters for the phase 1 scope of work?
Yes. Yeah. So we met many companies at Proposers Day, right, who have a pipeline of potential promising therapeutics. right, that are enabled by AI discovery approaches. And so we are really looking to, break through that bottleneck that occurs, right? Even after maybe AI picks you the best compound that you're pretty sure is going to be effective, we want to build those safety methodologies, right, that are going to allow for a regulatory agency to get to a place where in the future, our preclinical study environment is completely in silico, right? And we're doing that in a way that's more predictive than the in vivo tools that we use today.
Okay. Great to hear. Related sort of AI question here, where would AI modeling approaches for predicting toxicity and efficacy of small molecules fit into this?
Yeah, so I think you'll see in the solicitation, we're very safety focused. I think from an efficacy standpoint, things like pharmacodynamics and kinetics and the bioavailability of a biologic, et cetera, those things are very important for efficacy. And so I think our primary types of readouts that we're looking for from these tools is safety, is really recapitulating a healthy phase 1 trial population in a preclinical study environment. We are less focused on diseases per se and modeling diseases preclinically.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Um, Also, do you anticipate the digital CRO to be independent from the drug sponsor, as in the sort of the traditional approach to IND enabling studies?
Yeah, so I think it depends. Within the program, we have some requirements around the accessibility of these tools. And so we'd like after the program ends, right, for teams that are developing drugs not to just take the US investments and internalize them, right, not make those capabilities accessible. So we are working on contract language that would help ensure that those tools remain accessible, not in an open source way per se, but accessible in a way, in a fee for service way, right, that ensures that the investments that we make as part of the Catalyst program impact as broad of a community of drug development as possible.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have another question coming in about sort of general partnerships. It's a little bit different, I think, from sort of the teaming discussion we've had, but related. This particular organization, what types of partnerships do you want to see at the summary stage? For example, they are a company using the ASO platform with AI and wearables to accelerate development and clinical trials for ultra rare diseases. What types of partnerships would you might want to see for a company like them?
It's a great question, and again, it's a little depends on the context. But certainly, right, if there's the opportunity to build better sensors in living systems, right, maybe there's a partnership within TA2 to help leverage the collection they are doing in a way that is more fit for purpose for general human physiology. And then there might be arenas in which multiple product sponsors, right, would be interested in a way that helps their tools become more generalizable.
Okay, thank you. Another question we have, so can we demonstrate the approach in phase 1 using already approved drugs, or do we have to use a new compound?
So that's a great question. It's likely that we would fund approaches that could be looking at a new indication, a new delivery methodology, anything that would require in vivo preclinical experimentation per regulator guidance, and would require a new clinical trial of some kind. So those are really the goals, right? If it's something that wouldn't require going back into humans in the clinic, we would be less interested. And if it's something that doesn't necessarily require regulator interaction, if you're looking at an off-label use or something like that, we wouldn't be interested. And so we really want to have things that are going to see the regulatory agencies again, whether that's in a first time in a novel pharmaceutical compound or biologic, or if it's a previously existing drug with new indication, new label use, new delivery methodology that would require additional both in vivo and human clinical experimentation.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have today for questions. So thank you all for submitting your questions. If you have any remaining questions, we encourage you to go to the Catalyst program page, and there's an email there, and you'll be able to submit any additional questions that you have to the Catalyst team. But Andy, any last thoughts before I close this out for today?
Yeah. So we have a robust Q&A document that'll be accessible very soon. That includes the questions that we got here today and questions that we've gotten all across the program since we launched it a few weeks ago. And so if your question wasn't answered today or you didn't get a chance to ask it, it's very likely that's captured in these documents. And so we're going to have that available for the community very soon. The second thing is I'm looking at the question in the chat right now. January 31st is not a lot of time, right? And so engaging budget offices and business offices right now, knowing that for the abstract, we only need a rough order of magnitude budget, but for the full proposal, we are going to need detailed budgets. That allows some additional time. Our team is going to aim to turn our abstracts around in under 2 weeks after submission on November 25th. And so we want to give as much time as possible for teams to come together around the problem set for the Catalyst program. But I
Okay.
really appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you all for being here. We're happy to answer additional questions. Jordan's going to, and the Investor Catalyst Hub is going to disseminate all this material, as well as links to all of our program pages and Q&As. And I'm really looking forward to the innovative approaches you're going to bring to the program. So thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr. Kilianski, for your presentation today. It's been really wonderful to gain a more in-depth understanding of the Catalyst program and its goals. Thank you as well to attendees today for your presence, your interest, and engagement in today's session. We had a number of questions submitted, so really appreciate that enthusiasm. If interested, please remember to submit your solution summary for the Catalyst program by November 25th. That link is in the chat. Please also, when we close out the Zoom today, there will be a survey that will pop up. We really appreciate hearing your thoughts about new ways that we can engage this network, especially virtually. And if you aren't currently a spoke in the Investor Catalyst Hub but are curious to learn more, please check out our website and application. Those links are also in the chat. And lastly, if you haven't already, please follow us on our social media channels just to stay up to date on opportunities and events such as these as they come up. So thank you all again for your time and interest today, and wishing everyone a really great rest of week. Take care.